Welcome, guys, to another episode of the Christian Buddy Podcast. I am now graced to be in the presence with Fatima from Columbus, United States. How you feeling today, Fatima?
I'm doing very well, very well. Thank you for having me, Christian.
Glad to have you on the show. And you've recently written a book. Uh, and thanks for sending the book to me. I've actually just recently read it. It's a very touching and emotional story. Well, that was my opinion of it anyway. And I thought, let's not muck around here. Let's just jump straight into it. And the one thing that stood out to me was your religious background. Now, you've been a Buddhist, a Christian, and you have a Muslim, an Islamic name. What was it like growing up a Buddhist?
Uh, uh, well, um, Honestly, Christian, where I lived, you didn't have many Black people that were Buddhists. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
We didn't really, even though I grew up like in like they call it like the inner city or urban area, or we call it like the bad part of town or the hood. Um, It was mostly, people that look like me, every day, all day. But then when I would go to prayer as a Buddhist, I would be able to, um, intermingle or associate with or become friends with people of all different races. So that's one thing that I feel was awesome is that I never really had a tough time as far as like engaging with other races because as far back as I can remember, I was in a religion that brought all different walks of life. A lot it's an Asian religion, but I was often around Hispanics, Japanese, shoot, white, black. I mean, you name it. It's like Filipino. I mean, it was just all different races. So I thought that was pretty awesome that even though I lived in a place where it was very segregated, when I went to pray and when I would talk about my spirituality, it was with all different types of races. But growing up, like in school, I didn't tell many people because, people thought it was weird. And it was kind of hard to explain as a kid. So I often just really didn't talk about it. And only when I felt like I had really close friends would I invite them over to the house so that they could see us pray and get the understanding of what Buddhism looked like for our family. So yeah, there were some insecurities around my religious beliefs just because I didn't necessarily have a choice. It was my grandmother was a Buddhist, my mother was a Buddhist, uncles, um, aunts, everybody around me from as a child. So it was just something that I grew up in.
Wow. That's yeah, it's interesting because yeah, I guess myself, like I'm a Christian. I was baptized. I'm not. I wouldn't say that I'm a like heavily practicing. Yeah, I'm not going to church. I do pray. So look, I'm not the best example, but yeah, look, I believe in God. I definitely believe in God. There's no two ways about it. I definitely have faith, and I know that He's got my back. He or she's got my
Yeah,
back. So
yeah.
I definitely have faith that there's somebody or someone out there looking after me. So
Yes.
that's for sure. And yeah, your name Fatima, it's a beautiful name,
Thank
and
you.
there's actually a lot of I was your book revealed a lot of history behind it as well, which I found quite fascinating. Do you mind expanding on the history of your name, please?
Yeah, so as a kid, being named Fatima, people would always mess it up. Of course, they continue to, and it's okay now. But as a kid, it was just like, oh my God, like mud on my face. And I was embarrassed to have such a different name, not like Rose or Lucy or Sally. It was Fatima. So that was a heavy name to carry. And so in my neighborhood, there were a lot of Muslims that lived in my neighborhood. And we had, although we were Buddhist, we had a couple friends who were Muslims who practiced the Muslim faith and or Islamic faith. And one of them was a close, really close friend, and shared that my name actually means daughter of a prophet, because the name Fatima, she was the daughter of one of the head leaders of the Islamic faith. And so her name basically meant daughter of a prophet. So for me, I thought that's pretty awesome that I can go around and say, well, my name means daughter of a prophet, even though it really made no sense to me. It just sounded good. But also, as I grew up, even though people would still mess it up, and I still felt a little bit of embarrassment over carrying the name. I love that story, but also in the Catholic faith, I had friends who shared with me how the Mother Mary, Jesus's Mother Mary, had came to three cousins, and they were little kids, and one of the cousins, one of the children, was named Fatima or Fatima or Fatima, however way you would pronounce it, but that she came to them, and Fatima, it was put on her heart to share the message that she believed that she received from the vision of Mother Mary.
Yeah.
And so there are actually, I believe, a prayer that is dedicated to Lady of Fatima. And so my name carries like such an awesome, I feel like, indoctrination of the Catholic faith as well as the Islamic faith. And so for me, just a girl who grew up a Buddhist, I just think that's pretty awesome that I grew up a Buddhist, that I am a Christian, but that I have a name that has as an Islamic tie to it, as well as a prayer indoctrinated over it from the Catholic faith. I mean, it can't get no better than that. I'm like triple blessed, like seriously. So now I carry it proud.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's it. That's really cool. And yeah, kind of switching gears a little bit and talking about your book. Now, there's been a lot of look. It wasn't a bit of an emotional roller coaster reading that book, and
Wow.
you took us down. You took me down a journey. That's for sure.
Wow.
And I want to, if you don't mind, I want to kind of begin with this may be a traumatic event for you. And look, I'm just going to bring it up,
Yeah.
and it began. You mentioned in the book you had an incident when you were very young in the water, which
Mhm.
I believe it burnt your skin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that must have been a very traumatic experience. Do you mind recounting that for the audience if they are
Yeah.
if they would like to know about that? Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, for all my life, I knew that I had gotten burned around 2 years old from like the water heater that basically heats the water. Um, it was malfunctioned. It malfunctioned, and so my brother, my older brother, he was okay. When I say older, he was like 5. He, for whatever reason, that's a whole nother topic, Christian, but he was allowed to help or make the bath water and turn the water on. And so he made my bath water one night, and so and put me in the water, and it spouted out all hot water, and so it basically burned a quarter of my body. So basically, if you're thinking about the bottom of my torso, my legs pretty much and all of my feet are burned. And so I really, at 2 years old, I had to learn to eat, walk, and talk all over again. And just at 2, you're just now learning how to do any of the, at least a little bit of that. And so just going into shock at such a age, like a toddler, and having to learn all over again, I'm sure it was traumatic to the point where I don't remember it. I don't, my brain, and I've tried multiple times throughout my years to try to go back in my head and live that out. I only have the story of what consistent relatives have told me, that that is what happened to me, and definitely the scars that I live with every day. But yeah, it was definitely a horrible tragedy that happened. Even though I know that it was an accident, my brother, who's no longer with us, he passed away many years ago. He definitely carried that guilt being the person that made my bath water. And he always would promise me that one day that he would try to get me a skin graft to fix my feet. And there were a part of me that held on to that for a lot of years because I hated being different. I hated that people would look at me and talk to me, or I'm talking to them, but they're looking at my feet and they look engrossed by my feet. And so it took a lot of years for me to get to a place in my life where, similar to you, Christian, where my Christian beliefs helped me to see it as an opportunity to be a testimony, to say that it could have been different. It could have been my entire body that would have gotten burnt up. I could have died, from the shock. But instead, it was just my feet, and it's something that I can care. I can cover up if I don't feel comfortable showing my feet. I can always cover that up. And so, but just being able to see some type of a positive outlook on the fact that me, out of everybody else in my family, I was the one that had the accident happen to them. And so, there's some other things that I go into in the book about it that I'll leave there, because there is a turn of events that is, I think, pretty awesome to show just how good God is and how He covers us even when we don't expect it, or even in chaotic moments. But definitely, I had to learn, just like probably many people who are disfigured, to not allow my disfigurement to control my life, and to not make me feel like I'm less of a person because my feet don't look like the next person. Now,
Mm.
there are some shoes that I hate that I can't wear. There are shoes that I can't wear. And sometimes that really ticks me off. But that's just like somebody, with a big head. Some hats they can't wear. So it's like you just take what you can and you just roll with it. And I've been able to do that for the most part. And there are times when I still have some bad moments where it's like, ugh, I'm not feeling the
Not feeling
cutest
it.
today.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm so grateful that I've been able to get past that disfigurement in my life.
Yeah, I definitely struggle with a big head. Yeah, I struggle to put on hats sometimes, So look, yeah, I
No.
think you know what? If you look at the human being, if you just look at every single human, how many of there are of us? There's like maybe 7, 8 billion. I forgot the number, but if you look at every single human being in this world, I can guarantee you that there's something within them that they're not comfortable with. I think
Yeah.
everyone goes through that. And I think some people just mask it better than others. And some people are just able to hide it or some people just accept it. Some people like yourself, you've been able to, with the power of God,
Yeah.
with these things, you've been able to move past that. And it's beautiful to see that you're living a very strong life at the moment from what I can see. And yeah, it's good to see these things happen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a path. Like, it's been, just like with anybody, it's been a struggle when you look at yourself and you have to realize that God clearly made you in this image for a reason, and the Bible says He made us in His image. So at some point, we just have to accept that this is what it is. This is what I got to work with, and I'm just going to do the best I can with what I got. And that
Mm,
really has shaped me. Probably around in my 20s, I really had to just embrace the fact that I got wide hips, I got burnt feet. It's like, let's just go. Let's just move on.
yeah. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. It's life can be strange, I guess,
Yeah.
and then you got to ask yourself, what am I doing to help other people as well? So I guess. Yeah, for me anyway, I always like to reflect on how I've helped other people, and how am I giving back to the community, the society
Mm.
that we're living in now. So
Yeah. I think that's awesome. I mean, especially, I think we all have an opportunity to, but it's a matter of turning the pain or the unfortunate, misfortunate, horrific things that happen in our life, trying to look at it from an angle of how can I use this for the better? And there is
mm,
actually a way to use anything for the better. Some people, when they lose someone in a tragic way, they start a foundation. There's my son has. I talk about him in my book, and one of my children has a disease, an inherited blood disease. It's called sickle cell disease, and so we definitely was horrified that he had the disease, and that it can be completely terminal.
Sorry, sorry,
But
and sorry to cut you off. So, and for people that don't know what sickle cell is, do you mind
yeah,
explaining for the? Because
yeah,
I had to look it up. I'm not too sure what sickle cell is. Do you mind?
I appreciate that. I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Yeah, so sickle cell basically, so our white blood cells, they're shaped like a moon, like a circle, all throughout our body, and they support the oxygen flowing smoothly through our body. But on the other side, my son having sickle cell, his his blood cells are like a crescent, like a half moon. And so they can often clog throughout his body and prevent oxygen from flowing properly. And unfortunately, puts him in a situation where he has a lot of pain throughout his body, like major arthritis, if you want to say it in that way, and as well as his organs can deteriorate much quicker than anyone else, and usually the lifespan is about 45 years of age. So anybody thinking that their child is only going to live to 45, I mean, that's horrible in itself.
Mm.
And so yeah, he has a blood disease, and so we collectively as a family decided to try to turn that into a positive as much as possible, and use it as an opportunity to support sickle cell organizations, as well as fund blood drives as much as we can, because a lot of times sickle cell patients need blood transfusions.
Wow. And you are a mother of four boys, four beautiful
Yes.
boys. And and you speak of this term called unconditional love. And I want to ask you the question, what is your definition of unconditional love?
Shoot, I think honestly, unconditional love is something that we are all constantly striving for. It's as pure as a child's love for us. The more that we get exposed to life and cruelty and just unfairness, I think our love is shaped by that, unfortunately. But from the way that a child, as an infant or as a toddler, just looks up to us, so even at the age of my children are now, varied ages, they just see me as their mother, whether I'm having a horrible day or a wonderful day. They just want to be around me. That love, that no matter what happens in our life, that they trust me, and that they adore me. And the closest I think that we could ever come to that is Jesus or God's love for us. And I think we're constantly always trying to strive for that in other people. Pushing ourselves to be that for other people is a completely different challenge. But yeah, unconditional love. I think that when I think of my children and how they um, make me laugh, and how they are tender and want to give me a kiss at random moments and hug me, and just sleep in the bed with me after I've told them to leave me alone. It's definitely a form of unconditional love, and
Yeah.
I just wish that it was so easily able to be held onto. Unfortunately, life taints that a little bit. But one thing I can say is I know without a doubt that God has that unconditional love for me and for all of us.
Wow, that's great. Do you want to explain to the expand on with the audience your journey of becoming a mother, because you do have four sons?
Yeah.
Yeah, because maybe people are curious to hear more about that.
Well,
So
shoot. So for yeah, shoot, I don't even understand how I had four boys. But so just the journey to parenthood was a struggle for me, truly. I mean, okay, granted, I was just in my 20s, but by the time I hit my mid 20s, I really didn't think that I was going to be able to have children. I had had a couple of miscarriages by that point, and it seemed like every relative, every cousin, everybody around my age already had a child, and I just kind of like was the lone wolf. So nobody was really saying it, but it just was that assumption that I just wouldn't have kids. So when I did marry, and after a couple years was able to get pregnant, it shocked everybody. And unfortunately, by the time I hit around 4.5 months pregnant, I found out that I had a condition where it was very difficult to carry children. And so I went through a procedure a couple times to try to do whatever we could to be able to hold on to that pregnancy. It was a girl. And I was in the hospital for like 2 weeks, in and out of the hospital, doing everything that we possibly could do to retain the pregnancy. And so after 23 weeks pregnant, I did give birth very early, and my daughter lived only 5 hours. And so that was truly, that was a moment, Christian, where I really believe that was the first time I truly, with everything in me, questioned God and was angry and enraged at God of how he could allow me to go through such horrific heartbreak, especially um, being a Christian who loved God so much and was very active in the church, and by everything in me, just trying to live a Christ centered life. I didn't understand how I could just get hit in the gut like that. And I really remember having a moment where I remember my godfather telling me that God already knows what's on our heart. He already knows our heart condition. He already knows our whatever it is, the deep dark stuff that we think when nobody's around, or that we feel when nobody's around, or that we're even ashamed to say out loud. He already knows it, so you may as well speak it. And so I really did have a moment with God where it was like shaking my fist in the air and saying, God, how could you do this to me? I don't understand why you would take my child. And I hated that I still looked pregnant, and really isolated myself a lot during that time, just to try to get the baby weight off so that nobody would ask me about my baby. And through that time, I actually ran up on the story of Hannah in the Bible. And Hannah was someone who was married to a man who loved her dearly, Elkanah. But back then, polygamy was it was okay, and he had other wives, and there was one wife that would just harass Hannah because she had an issue carrying children. And clearly, she had had, multiple miscarriages, or she just was not able to give birth to a child. And in her most desperate moment, similar to how I felt, she went to the temple and prayed and asked God, and said, God, if you bless me with a child, I promise I will give him back up to you. If you bless me with a son, actually, because back then, and in a lot of places still, sons mean richness. There's something to be said about having a son and being able to keep the lineage of your last name going. And so she prayed, God, if you bless me with a son, I will give him back up to you. And in that, when I found that story in the midst of my grieving, I prayed that. But I also feel that in her story, it's profound because she had to come to a place where she had been through so much heartbreak, yet she was still going back to the temple and praying to God. So for me, that says that even though her heart was broken, she knew who her savior was. And so for me, in the midst of my grieving, I had to recognize that there are some things I may not ever understand about my life. There are some things I may not ever agree with that has happened in my life, but I must always remember that God is God for a reason. And either I'm going to serve him or I'm not. And that really was that a moment in my life where
Wow.
I had to make a choice. Either I'm going to follow him blindly, basically, because it's a faith walk anyway, or I'm going to hold on to this bitterness and rage and anger and go another way. And I made a choice to follow God. And I would say about 4 to 6 weeks later, I found myself pregnant again, with a son. And he was actually 1 pound, 9 ounces, and stayed in the hospital for 3 months. And I was in the chapel praying all the way, but my prayer was different this time. It truly was, God, he is yours. I surrender him up to you. Whatever you do, I'll be okay with it. It is well with my soul. And now he is 21 and so-called living his best life and asking for money, but then telling me he's grown and just getting on my nerves. But he is alive and healthy, and I'm so grateful. And I also have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. So all boys.
Wow.
God has definitely blessed me. I grew up with all boys, 5 boys, and I was the only girl. And then I turned around and had 4 boys. So God definitely has a sick sense of humor.
There must be a lot of testosterone going through the household. Like,
It,
yeah.
yeah, more than you could ever believe. I mean, poop is one of the major things. Farts is a love language, and butt, booty, poop, and farts.
Yeah.
That's what it's talked about all the time in my house. And it's loud, and that's okay because I'm loud and I'm used to it. So, you know. So
Wow.
what else you got? What else do you want to
What else have I
explore?
got? Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there going on,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate you opening up and really explaining that in the book. And yeah, for those that don't know or unaware, so you lost your first daughter,
Yeah.
and she died. Was that due to like heart complications, or was it?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
so it's called an incompetent cervix. I don't want to gross the guys out, but it's called an incompetent cervix, and I had no idea that I even had that issue. And so, I have speculation of where that issue came from, but yeah, and so there's a procedure that can totally be done, in America. I'm sure all over it seems to be a common procedure. It's just that by the time it was discovered with me, it was kind of too late. I had already, I guess there was so much weight, so I don't know, so much other stuff going on inside my body that the procedure wouldn't hold. So I actually went through the procedure twice, and they would tilt my body up totally vertical to the ceiling to try to keep the baby in, and I spent my birthday in the hospital where the nurses came and sang happy birthday to me. And it was a very, in the Bible, they talk a lot about desert places and or in the wilderness type of places. And that's like an analogy for saying like you feel so alone and you just feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere and you can't even see far enough to even know which direction to go. And that was definitely one of those times in my life where I had no idea how it was going to turn out. I knew what I wanted more than anything in my life, but I had no control. And there are so many times in my life that I've lived in a similar space where I had no control. And I am like a A-type personality, so I like to have control. I feel secure when I know what's going to happen, or if I can plan a backup plan. And in these cases, it's often where you can't even think of a backup plan, and your only backup plan is God. And but in those most scary for me, most uncertain moments in life, I've also found that I've grown closer to God. That if it wasn't for
mm,
those moments where I was scared as all get out, I didn't know what to do. I just was almost like paralyzed in fear, but I knew enough to pray. It kept me close to God's garment, kept me holding on, even if it was to a finger, like a child to a parent holding on to the pinky. But I was holding on, and in the midst of that, He always brought me out. I may not have seen the way out, but He always brought me out. And even when the way that He brought me out, I felt was a horrible way to bring me out, on the other side, I would I would be able to say farther on into the healing that, okay, I get it. I don't get why I had to deal with the pain, but I do get that I learned something, that I learned compassion, that I learned a sense of gratitude, and that I'm able to share with somebody else who may be following the same road that I've already traveled. So I just really think that it's important to understand that life is a mystery. We have no clue about what's on the other planets. I mean, it's just a mystery. And God is one of those big mysteries. And it's okay to not understand everything about God, but still revel in how amazing He is. It's okay to do both. And I think that's where we should be, because if we understood everything, then we'd be God.
yeah,
So I just think that it's okay to be in a place where I'm confused on some stuff. I don't understand why this happens in the Bible, or I don't understand what this meant, or I don't understand why this says this in the Bible. But But yet I still understand that you are amazing and that you are awesome and that somehow you know my thoughts, because I would think something that nobody else knows and then it will come to pass. And I'm like, nobody even knew that. How did that even happen? It couldn't have happened but from God. And so I just think as I've continued to hold on to God's hand despite many tragedies that I've had in my life, it truly, truly has grown me into not this naive, Pollyanna-ish, everything is wonderful, a Mary Poppins type of person. But no, understanding that life brings uncertainty and life brings pain. And
Yeah.
either I'm going to walk it by myself or I'm going to walk it with God, so that even in the midst of my heartache, there's a way for me to find some comfort and some strength.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it what you just mentioned there, I believe it serves as a map. So a map to navigate life. And I know maybe there's some people listening to this podcast right now that are going through really difficult times, really testing times. And I feel like you're doing a service to them. You're actually you're laying it out. You're in the open. You're in the public space of the internet, which can be a scary place. But you've laid out your whole life, and that's such a brave thing to do. And I feel like you are helping humanity by opening up, and people will look to you for guidance. People will look to you in tough times. I know people who have had their parents pass away, and maybe their children have passed away, and these are really, and I thank God that I haven't experienced anything like that.
Yeah.
But these people will look up to you and will say what you've done, and what you're speaking about, and you'll provide some comfort in that, and that's
Mm.
really nice to know, really nice to understand that there's
Wow.
this, that God is there, so
Yeah. Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I think unfortunately we all have had some hard knocks in one way or another. You live long enough, you're gonna go through something that is just gonna knock you off your feet. But I feel like that puts you closer on your knees to pray.
yeah.
But that was cheesy, but
bring on
um,
bring on the chase. We love chase. We love chase.
but I just think that with me writing the book was like an extension of healing for me. It was an extension of therapy for me, a therapy that I didn't even know that I needed, honestly. All these different events that I talk about in my book, um, at the time that I was going through it, I always learned how to be a survivor. I grew up in a single parent home with a bunch of boys around me. It was rough as it could get, and I've had some hard knocks as a child, not just with the burns, but with physical and sexual abuse, and even going through a marriage of years of physical abuse and just horrible bad decisions that I made myself. And so I didn't realize that I needed to deal with the emotional aspect of the things that I had gone through. So I survived it, and a lot of us learn how to survive it. A lot of us get through it, but we there's residue of hurt, there's residue of rage and anger and heartbreak that we never go back to resolve. And that's where I found myself later on in my years. 2 years ago, I was sitting there spiraling out of control, and really in a place where I wanted to end my life. And it was because of all these accumulation of things that I never truly dealt with, like processed. And I had to gain the courage to go and speak with somebody and go to therapy and talk with somebody so that they could help me to walk through the layers in my life of how I had become the person that I had become. And also with going and coupling that with a program at church called Celebrate Recovery, that definitely was an anchor for me. But them together helped heal some places in my heart that I didn't even know I needed healing from. So what I would say, Christian, maybe what we're talking about, and I appreciate the fact that there may be some people out there who will really take ownership and hear what we're talking about and say, that's me. And then there are some people that may not even be in this space, and that's okay too. But I would just implore them to think about the people that are around them. I don't think I think it's a disservice to leave people out there on a limb, destroying their lives without, if we're a true friend, without trying to help them. So
Mm,
if there's somebody in your life that you could think about, to the listeners, who is like overtly extra. In America, that means you're just like dramatic, like seriously dramatic. Everything is just like high end dramatics, and they just can't cope. Or if you know somebody that kind of goes inward into a shell, almost like a child when conflict happens, they just can't, again, they can't cope. Um, if you know somebody who is like on simmer, I call it on simmer because they're always like agitated and just ready to just pop off and blow off at any given moment over something so minute, they're just like flipping out. Or if they like to celebrate drama, but then when you try to have an intimate conversation, they don't have time for it. They can't, they're not in touch with their emotions. If you know anybody with these type of attributes, those are the type of attributes that I had. And people don't people aren't like that for no reason. There's a reason. There's something behind that. And so what I would say is, if you know somebody that has some of those attributes, even one of those attributes, get them the book, and hopefully it'll help them to see themselves as they're reading my story, and hopefully it'll give them a seed of a way to approach healing for their own life. And you know, it's just baby steps. I offer baby steps in my book, the things that I had to crawl through. There are much more that people can do, but if you know somebody with some type of attributes, like, or behavioral deficiencies, like I just shared, definitely help them. Sometimes it's hard to have the conversation, and a book can do wonders. I would encourage you, to get the book. The prescription is in the dirt. And the reason why I named it that is because what we've been talking about, it's all my dirt. It's all the stuff that was just dirty and grimy and shameful, and something I shouldn't be talking about. Some stuff I lost family members over because I started talking about it. And it's all that dirt that we're ashamed of. And if we're not careful, that same dirt can bury us, and we'll be walking around disconnected from the world, trying to live and making horrible decisions, and having a chip on our shoulder throughout our entire life. But Kristian, if we are just a little brave, and just get a little bit of encouragement, then we can use that dirt and turn it like soil, and then all that dirty stuff can be used for something beautiful. The Bible says
mm,
that God makes beauty for ashes. He can take those ashes, those things that we're so ashamed of in our life, and use it like he's using my story. I'm not the only one. I'm just going first.
yeah. Thanks. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. So I guess on another note, you what was it like? I guess growing up without a father.
Mm.
Um, I guess that would have been a yeah. It's not an enjoyable experience, but
Yeah.
and
Um, I mean, really, it was, I hate to say it, but I didn't realize it was a big deal until it honestly became a big deal. And what that means is, as a child, he just simply wasn't there. And so I never knew that I was missing anything. And unfortunately, I was in a community where there were a lot of parents that one parent or the other was not there. There's a lot of single parent homes in where I lived. And so it wasn't a big deal until I began to grow up, got to like a teenager age, and then you get friends from other sides of the tracks, you could say. And you see the two parent home, and you see the interaction between a daughter and a father, and then you realize that that's missing. So I really didn't even notice that it was a big deal. If anything, the two stepfathers that I did have, they weren't the best at all. So it was almost better to not have one.
yeah.
And so, but when I got older and realized that there was a connection that I was missing, coupled with the fact that my father would sometimes try to enter into my life, I think on an emotional scale, like maybe when he felt like he wanted to have a relationship, and then those emotional cords were pulled, then he would kind of try to come into my life, and then he would disappear. And so that became very frustrating. So by the time I hit 17, 16, 17, 18, it really was a horrible thing. It was a real horrible feeling to know that I was the only one, I believe, in my out of my friends that didn't have their dad. And that was tough. But again, I grew up being tough. I grew up being able to cope with anything. But again, that emotional piece of not having a father there. I really think that it damaged me with in the way that I viewed men and in the way that I chose who I would date. And I wound up marrying somebody that was had the more so the personality of my mom. And there were often times that my mom could be very, hostile verbally. And her, disciplining was pretty tough at times. And I went from one home and straight into a man's home who abused me for. We were together 12 years. We dated for 3 years. He didn't pick a hand up. And then when we got married for 9 years, there was intermittent abuse. And so
Mm,
I just feel like if I would have had my father, and he says that to this day, and I think that's one of his regrets is that he wished that he would have been there to help guide me as far as my selection with men, that he wished that he could have given me input on what a man's love looks like. And so that's something that he has to live with. But I'm so grateful that through the process of me working on healing my wounds and not covering them up, but really facing the different incidences that happened in my life, specifically the one regarding my father, and being able to face it head on, the hard truths of that situation, and hold him accountable for what he was over, but then also hold myself accountable for my bitterness of not allowing him in my life when he was ready to try to work it out. um but looking at that, it opened up the door for us to have a relationship, but it took a long time. A lot of things that I'm talking about, it doesn't happen overnight, but we don't become who we are overnight, right? It's a steady process of working on yourself. And that means like being aware of the things that you do and then having the heart to ask yourself why you do that. Like for me, I was really angry and I would get really, really just like furious when I felt like somebody was ignoring me, whether it was at work, whether it was in a relationship, whether it was my friends. If I felt like I was talking and they started a whole nother conversation or didn't even acknowledge that I said something on the inside, I would be fuming. I may not have
mm,
shown it, but I would be so angry. When I started working on myself, that was the opportunity for me to look at that and say, Fatima, why does that make you so angry? Like you get almost irrational angry. Why? And it made me go back into my childhood to see that most of my life I felt invisible. Most of my life, I felt like in everything that I've encountered in my life, meaning as a child, 5 years old, 15 years old, 18 years old, whatever, when my dad didn't come to my graduation, I felt invisible, just invisible. And so now that I'm an adult, I felt like I should be able to control not feeling invisible. So when people don't talk to me, I flip out, right?
yeah.
And so, but that's the work. When I say doing the work, that's the work I'm talking about. Looking at situations, habits that you have in your life that you have looked at as that's just me. No, it's not just you. It's you picked it up from somewhere. You either picked it up
Mm,
from a friend, you picked it up from I don't know where you picked it up from, but you picked it up. Okay. So if it's a horrible habit and people have called you out on it, and you even have called yourself out on it, then it's time to get the courage to look at yourself dead off in the mirror and say, I'm changing that. I'm not carrying that with me any further into 2021. I'm changing that about myself. But in order to change it, you have to discover why it happened to begin with. And so that's the soul healing, I like to call it, that I went through in the process of me just kind of finding some freedom and finding my voice and ultimately writing my book.
yeah. That's such a powerful concept that you just described there. It's like how can I describe it? It's almost like something evolving into a greater version of themselves. It's almost, yeah, it's like someone evolving into their greatest version, and that's something that I strive to do almost on a daily basis, is become a
Yes.
better version than what I was yesterday.
Yes. And that's what we
Yeah.
should all want, right? Like
Mm.
we shouldn't want to just get up, go to work, come home, drink a beer, whatever, go back to bed. Like we should want more out of our life. And I really believe that that's our purpose on this world. God didn't bring us to just be stumps on the street. Like we all have a purpose. That purpose can change based on what's happening in our lives, but I definitely believe that we all have a purpose. But we can't. There is no way, or if people get confused by purpose, we have a destiny, right? We have a personal goal. There's something that God wants to propel us to, and where we are our greatest self. But we can never get there if we're filled with junk. It just can't happen. I don't care how much you try, it's just not going to happen to the fullness in which he wants to bring it out of us if we're filled with hate that we don't talk about. It's just deep rooted inside us, so that whenever the holidays come, we don't want to go to such and such's house because we can't stand them, but we dare not say that because that's such a horrible thing to say, but it's in our heart. So if we are filled with stuff like that, how in the world could we be fully used to our greatest potential? It's not possible. And we'll work overtime looking up YouTube and looking up all these different steps on how to make ourselves greater. And it's all a waste of time because it's from within. We become greater from within. And if we're not dealing with what's within, then we can look up every step in the book that we want to. We're gonna still stay stuck. It's just
Yeah,
the truth.
exactly.
And so I've had to learn that. And it was hard. This is not easy work. It's not for the fainted heart. This is a decision that you make when you say, I'm tired of being tired. I'm tired of the story that people tell about me. I'm tired of my reputation being tainted with my past. I want to change my future. And that's when you decide that you're gonna do whatever it takes to look to do some self-reflection and change your horrible habits. And then it's just a matter of being more aware. And a lot of times, some people would say meditation is good. For me, my faith is very important, so I kind of lean more on praying. But even in prayer, there's meditation. There's a moment where you stop talking and you have to listen.
Yeah.
And so I just think that it's a critical step that we all need to do to get to that ultimate place that honestly we're all in search of.
Yeah, I'm a big believer of meditation, and yeah, I think the what I've learned through meditation is that, I follow this one spiritual teacher. His name's Muji, and he speaks about the mind, and he speaks about that the most natural place for the mind is just joy, love, and bliss.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, look, like I think day to day activities, we're in this constant, we're in the real world, and we're doing things. But then when we have time, we can reflect on who we are as a person. And yeah, like if things crop up
Yeah.
in our psyche, in our mental, and it's healthy to address those things, and really look within, to heal ourselves. And yeah, it's not an easy process. It's not an easy process to look at yourself in the mirror. That's a very difficult thing to do. you know
Yeah.
you're almost going within that pain, and
Yeah.
and
And
you're
then,
going. Yeah, sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, no,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I forgot what I was saying. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's a tough process. It's hard to do. Not many people can do it. So yeah, it's refreshing seeing your journey.
It's
And
tough, but I don't
yeah.
think, yeah. I mean, I think it's tough work and we have to toughen up. I just feel like we make choices every day, Christian, right? So we make choices. We pick our car. We pick where we want to live. We pick where we want to work. When we don't like the atmosphere, we make a plan to quit and set up another job. Our brain is just expansively strong, and we make decisions every single day, from the smallest ones of what toothpaste we're going to buy to the bigger ones of, am I going to save to buy a house, or do I want to lease, whatever. So if we can make those type of decisions, we can definitely make the decisions to change our life.
Yeah.
And I didn't buy into that. I never thought that I actually could change my life. Like I just never thought that I was probably important enough to even, I don't know, to even understand the concept of it. But walking through the process, which was truly just a day-to-day process, it was just a day-to-day conscious decision that I want to be better. And then it's like when you're constantly telling yourself you want to be better, you start to seek out ways to be better. You start thinking differently. You start changing negative mindsets into positive mindsets, right?
Mm.
You start doing things in the natural. And it's just one decision at a time. It doesn't have to be this mountain of decisions. It's one decision. If you know that this person is no good in your life, whenever you get around them, they always poke fun at you and you're the butt of the joke. That one decision, just don't go out with that person the next time that they ask you out. That's a profound decision. That's one step into redirecting the trajectory of your life. And so that's what I mean. And it's just a step by step, one day at a time approach. But I think it's critical that if we can make all these other decisions in our life about the external things around us, then why can't we make those decisions that are most critical for our soul and our spirit to be able to connect and it all be one? Why can't we take just as much care for that, or for our mental health? A lot of these type of things that we're talking about, all these things accumulated to me being having anxiety and depression, a complicated relationship, I say, with anxiety and depression. And it was because for 40 something years, I didn't address it. And it took me till I was 44 to get to a place where I was so tired that I was willing to be open to the possibility of changing my life. And so, even if it's just being open to the possibility, that's one step forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
I
And
know that's a lot.
lot to digest there. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
that's good. Well, you certainly don't look 44. I thought I just you definitely have a youthful appearance. So
Thank
that's
you.
yeah,
Thank you.
that's
I'm actually 46. My son says, "Mommy, you're almost 50." I say, "Shut up. You don't know how to count."
yeah, wow, that's awesome. And
Yeah.
I guess yeah, look, I think I might finish the conversation here. It's been amazing speaking with you, and yeah, once again I'm very I just want to send out my compliments to you for being brave enough to share your story and your book. And yeah, I didn't want to go too much into the book because I thought, maybe people want to read about it and they can discover
Yes.
it on their own journey. So and speaking of the book, how can people tell people how they can get in touch with buying the book, or how can people connect with you,
Yes.
speak with you? Yeah.
Well, absolutely. So again, thanks for having me. And the book is called The Prescription is in the Dirt. The Prescription is in the Dirt, and it is on Amazon in ebook version if you like a digital copy, but you can also get it in paperback. And I actually got my first UK review last week, which was pretty awesome. So you can be my second, Christian.
Sure.
But yeah, you could definitely get it on Amazon, but also on my website, fatimac.com, fatimac.com. There's an opportunity to purchase the book, but also to get to know me a little bit more intimately, and just my thought process, just some reflections that I have on there. I also offer a service where if you need somebody to talk to and you're not sure who you can lean on right now, you don't know who your safe place is, where your safe place is at, you can definitely reach out for a 20-minute session and you talk and I listen. I like that part of what I do. And but yeah, I'm also on social media like everybody, I guess. I'm on Facebook and on Instagram and on LinkedIn. So you can definitely look me up, Fatima C. Oliver.
Cool. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening. And please don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. And thank you once again, Fatima, for being on the show. And hope everyone enjoys their day. Thank you.
Yes.